Cougars kicked off its football program in 1922, and over the years, BYU has played 918 games, and there have been so many impact athletes, administrators, and coaches that have filled the pages of history, and some of them are in a new book called What It Means to Be a Cougar, written by Associate Athletic Director and fellow Orem Tiger Duff Tittle. And Duff is in our True Blue studios tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
This is a great book. I've been reading it all weekend, and the idea of compiling everyone's firsthand accounts of their BYU experience, where'd that come from?
It actually came from the publisher. Triumph Books approached me in the middle of the football season last year and just had this idea. They'd tried it on a few schools, and it had been successful, and they asked me if I'd be willing to be involved in the BYU book.
So you had to first try to decide who were the big shots that would be worthy of the book, then reach out to them, and what were you seeking back?
Well, I was really trying to find the cream of the crop player that had played at BYU, looking at All-Americans, some of the storied names from Cougar history.
Right.
And tracking them down wasn't easy. That was part of the difficult process of the book. But I was just hoping to hear stories, not necessarily football stories either. Yeah. With the title of the book, What It Means to Be a Cougar, there's so much more depth to it than just football. Obviously, I wanted football.
Did you decide what it meant to be a Cougar after you had everyone's input? Have you come up with a thesis?
I kind of had my own feelings of what it meant to be a Cougar growing up here locally and,
right,
being a Cougar all those years. But it was really neat to hear the different thought processes that the athletes had.
Any stand out in your mind as you're gathering this, going, I had no idea about that?
I think that's probably the most shocking thing to me, being around the program for the last 20 years. I thought I knew a lot of the stories, particularly those athletes that I'd worked with. And I think to a T, everybody had a story that I'd never even heard. And I was grateful that they would be willing to let me, share that story, that they were willing to tell me and let me do with it.
Now, you break it down into decades, and so I went right to the 60s with Eldon the Phantom Forti, and learned a couple things reading in here. Number one, he went to his high school football practice one day at Granite to meet his new head coach, Lavelle Edwards, and that's how that relationship started. And then he comes to BYU, and there's one return missionary on the entire team. There are 76 on this year's team.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you'll see through the 70s and 80s is how Lavelle embraced the missionary program and realized that, it wasn't a detriment to the program, that these kids could go, they could have a great experience and come back and be better for it.
Gary Scheide, I was reading about that, fascinated that Coach Edwards went to his house to convince him to come so he could throw the football. And he says, Coach, you've got the #1 running back in the country. How am I supposed to believe you're going to throw the ball? And he said, trust me, we're going to throw the ball.
Yep.
And he did.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and he had to wait for Gary a couple of years to try the baseball thing before he was willing to come to BYU and give it a shot playing football.
Jim McMahon, of course I read that first, but I didn't know coming out of Roy High School he wanted to go to UNLV. But his dad said, nope, you're not going to UNLV, and then he chose BYU. That was a surprise to me. And I think what I enjoyed the most from the McMahon chapter was, some things were said after he left about his BYU experience, whether they were in context or out. But in this book, he says if he had to do it all over again at BYU, he would. And that said a lot to me about maturity, and he really does love this place.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that he gained a lot from coming here as a quarterback and working in that offense, and it really helped prepare him for the next level.
Now, where can people get this book, which I recommend to every Cougar fan? And you know what? There might be a few Utes that would enjoy this as well. Maybe just a few.
Well, it's out everywhere, really. It's at the BYU bookstore and Deseret Book, and it's in some of the other big bookstores around town. Eventually, it'll make it to the Costco's and Sam's Clubs of the world. So, yeah, it's pretty widely distributed.
Good work. You may be the first Orem Tiger to have written a book. The rest of us are envious.
Chad Lewis has one too.
Oh yeah, so there's that. He was. Yeah, but he's
I think I got him because my first book came out before his.
There you go. We've trumped Chad Lewis. All right, Duff. Good luck with the book. Nice job.
Thank you very much.
Recommend it to everybody.